Well, let's get some more reaction on the life of Nelson Mandela. And of course, the inequalities that persist in South Africa following that lecture by the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. We're joined via Skype this afternoon on ENCA by the ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule, the leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, and the leader of the UDM, Bantu Holomisa. Gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time. I just want to point out that technically, because we are in different locations and we're Skyping, due to connectivity issues, there will be slight delays as and when I ask you questions. First up, I will start with you, Ace Magashule. Just an overriding comment on the Mandela Day. After all, Nelson Mandela was the father of the African National Congress. How do you respond to the calls for a new social order made by the United Nations Secretary-General as we mark this day?
Well, I think during those heydays, even when the people of South Africa adopted the Freedom Charter, we have always called for a peaceful world, a world of humanity, where everybody can enjoy prosperity and peace. And Mandela was undoubtedly one of the greatest examples of the triumph and tenacity of human spirit. And his whole life was a testimony to overcome adversity.
And I'll bring you in now, Bantu Holomisa. How would you then respond to the call for a new social order? You were close to Tata Madiba, not just only politically, but also through family ties.
Yes.
Okay, we seem to have a problem there with the line to General Holomisa. We'll try and get him back on. I'll bring on the leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, a call for a new social order. And you are the opposition, official opposition party in Parliament. How do you respond to that call?
Well, I think that undoubtedly it was needed before the COVID crisis. It's going to be needed even greater after the COVID crisis. Truth of the matter is we have far too many citizens in South Africa who are excluded from opportunity, who languish in poverty, and have very little hope for the future. I think that we've got to reinvent the way we do things, and we've got to build a more inclusive society that offers more people a pathway to prosperity. I think one of the great lessons of Nelson Mandela was a triumph of the spirit over adversity, but also the generosity of that spirit as well. And we've seen that in the many acts around South Africa today. Now, while the acts that we've seen today to celebrate the birthday may not solve the problems long term, but what they do demonstrate is that there is goodwill in South Africa, that you do have people who are willing to work together to achieve a better tomorrow. And I think that's the message that we should be taking forward. That is the challenge that Nelson Mandela gave us, to build a better South Africa, to build a better tomorrow for our people. I think that should be the task that we're committed to every day, not just once a day on Mandela's birthday.
Okay, let me bring the General now, Bantu Holomisa. I think the sound is back. Apologies for that. And as I said, from your perspective, not only you had political connections with Nelson Mandela, but you also had family ties. How do you respond to this call for a new social order?
The truth of the matter is that the Secretary-General of the United Nations is reminding us, or rather is referring to our Constitution. Our Constitution does not mean swear in terms of government's obligation to ensure that all South Africans' rights are protected. So today he was, to us, we need to go back and look and scan the period from 1994 and see which areas were failed. But overall, I think Madiba would not be happy today because there have been a lot of embarrassing stories and issues wherein you see that the yesteryears, the struggle stalwarts of yesteryear are looting the resources which were supposed to have gone and addressed the plight of the poor, of the poorest.
Okay, I'll bring you in there, Mr. Magashule. The heroes of yesteryear looting and affecting the plight of the poorest. I mean, the ANC, the African National Congress, has been a governing party for 26 years, since 1994. How do you respond to that statement that just General Holomisa has made?
Well, I'm lucky to have served in the National Executive Committee when President Mandela was the president of the ANC, together with Comrade Bantu Holomisa. And all what Mandela has stood for, a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united, prosperous South Africa, I think we have not yet just achieved a prosperity party. But what Mandela fought for, and many other leaders, because what we should actually be careful about is to actually take Mandela out of the leadership collective of Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and many others who have been pioneers of the revolution of South Africa. And Mandela, I don't want to get into politics today. I think what the governing party, the party of Mandela, has done, and what the Secretary-General of the United Nations was reminding us, is to continue addressing the issues of inequalities, the issues of poverty, issues of famine and hunger under the present COVID conditions. And I think our focus should really be there, because I don't want to politicize this day today, except that Madiba was part of the collective, and Madiba himself defined that collective of the African National Congress emerging out of struggles of our people. But today I think the focus is to call upon all South Africans to work together. This is what Guterres was actually saying, and he says, if I have to quote him, he says, remember that the life and story of Mandela, if we don't work together, inequalities work against human development. Inequalities and discrimination and racism definitely works against human development. So our call today to all South Africans and the people of the world is to continue making sure that we fight poverty, we fight hunger and famine, and we build a prosperous world throughout our lives. And I think that's what we should actually be focusing on today. The government in 25 years has actually given those who did not have water, those who did not have electricity. There are many other challenges, but the dignity of a black person and the right to vote has actually come through struggles. And I just want to say to everybody today, this is the call by the United Nations Secretary-General, and I call during this Mandela Day to ensure that we unite and we come together as a nation.
Yeah, but he also called this United Secretary-General, and I'm looking at the speech now, he also spoke about the need to fight corruption. And he said that depends on accountability, because the vicious cycle of corruption is both a cause and effect of inequality. Do you think the governing party is doing enough today to stop the vicious cycle of corruption in our country?
Well, there's no way without the ANC we could have. In fact, remember, we are the ones who have initiated laws against corruption all the time, all the years, until today. We are continuing to do so. It is going to be an ongoing struggle, and we will actually deal with it as we move forward. And we are the ones who are actually establishing even organs and agencies which fight against corruption. We're not afraid to do what we are supposed to be doing, the right thing, and making sure that our people have prosperity in South Africa. And that's why I say I don't want to cite what Mandela said when he was even in Parliament about the DA, a front for white racist interest. I'm quoting him directly and verbatim. And today is really, as I say, we are here to ensure that we have equitable new global deal and social contract.
Well, we all want a new global deal from what the United Nations Secretary-General is saying, and we need to work together. I don't think anybody is arguing about that. We shouldn't go to the past. But, Mr. Steenhuisen, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think if there's any party that's entrenching racism today, it's the party of the Secretary-General who's just spoken. And I think it's a darn cheek that he would dare come on TV and talk about the dignity of black South Africans when you've got patients fighting each other for oxygen cylinders and are dying in state hospitals that have been completely incapacitated because of the looting and maladministration that's taken place under his government. In fact, if I was him, I wouldn't show my face in public, given the disastrous situation where you have 10 million South Africans who are unemployed, where you've had billions looted, and he may have set up the structures, but not a single senior politician has gone to jail or been held accountable or had to pay back the money. Instead, we've just seen people protected, cosseted, and the Secretary-General himself has terrible allegations hanging over his head. And they very well set out an excellent book called Gangster State. And I think it's a cheek for him to come on national television and lecture people about corruption when he himself has very serious charges to answer. I also think it's very hypocritical for him to come here and start pointing fingers at other political parties when his own is responsible for the dire situation which we find ourselves in, on the verge of an economic depression, millions unemployed, one in 7 households going hungry in the nation. That's not a record anyone should be proud of, least of all on Mandela Day.
I want to find out if you, gentlemen, as political leaders, at some point as we talk here, can actually work together as the United Nations Secretary-General is asking the world to do. But before I do that, General Holomisa, you mentioned in a statement that the UDM has issued today in marking the International Nelson Mandela Day, entitled, "What Would Madiba Do Today?" You talk about #stop the degeneration. In a nutshell, what do you want to see change then? How do we stop the degeneration that we are seeing in our country today?
I'm praying that we would have competent cabinet ministers and DGs, more or less the same caliber which Madiba had during his time as head of government. I wish also that in addressing these problems, we would appoint people on merit, especially at local, provincial government, where you see that these monies are being looted left and right. I would like to see that the employment of people should be accelerated, especially in maintaining the infrastructure which we inherited from the National Party. If you look at some of the towns, small towns, they are collapsing. And you also, it's common now to see potholes even on highway. Please, 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 Bantu Holomisa.
Okay, now let's just talk about an issue that came up in the discussion with the United Nations Secretary-General and Nigiwe Bikitsha of the Nelson Mandela Foundation about the importance of aligning what the Secretary-General of the United Nations referred to as leadership and power. He said some people have power, but they show no leadership. Some people who are in leadership have no power. May I start with you, Secretary-General of the ANC. How would you feel in our country today we are doing? Because some people point to some instances to a lack of leadership, and that some people are in power, but they don't show leadership.
Well, check our history since 1994, because I'm not going to talk like an opposition party. The role of opposition party is to oppose what the governing party is actually doing, because they think at some stage one day they will ascend to power. Look at our history since 1994. What we have done to bring one single education for South Africans, when during those days we had different education departments, almost 13 of them. And today we have one united education for all South Africans. Black and white children can actually come together and study together. we can live together because we have made from 1994, we have done away with group areas because we regard the freedoms, the basic freedoms of our people. And this is what we should actually be saying. This is what the ruling and the governing party has been doing and will continue to do. And that's why we will embrace working together with any other party which is actually interested in uplifting the lives of our people. There is no way we can say let's not work together. But we can't be taken back because South Africa has a constitution. South Africa has a Bill of Rights. South Africa and the Constitution talks about the universal principle, where you actually ensure that people who are charged have a right also. The DA is citing some of the things, but they had Breitenbach in court. And when Breitenbach was in court and charged, they never actually said step aside. And so they can't actually try and play morality here. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution of South Africa and any member of the African National Congress is entitled to what is there in the Constitution, which we have actually fought for.
Can we, Secretary General, Secretary General Magashule, can we just look at this from a different sort of helicopter view? We have a Constitution, and it's regarded as the best in the world. It's got a Bill of Rights. It's got a wonderful preamble, which I printed earlier and I read myself before this afternoon again, just to remind me. But when you look at where we are today as a country, and you see what the rest of the world is doing in terms of what the Secretary-General of the United Nations was saying. In this country today, we have inadequate health system. We don't have universal health coverage. We have gaps in social protection in this country today. We have structural inequalities, very deep ones for that matter. And we're having environmental challenges. And of course, we know everybody in the world is suffering from climate crisis. Can we find a way forward that enables us to embrace and implement these things so they can become a reality? We have good policies, good laws, but it looks like we're not really acting in the right way. How would you respond to that?
We are acting in the right way, and that's why we are also calling upon opposition parties, and most of them support us on the national health insurance, because the national health insurance is actually going to address those millions of black people who have no access to medical facilities. And inequalities is a global phenomenon. And that's why we must actually understand. Maybe at times I feel that you guys have never traveled the world and see how people live in many countries around the globe. And when you come back home, you'll realize what we have actually achieved. We have achieved a lot, and we are continuing with our struggle for bettering the lives of our people, black and white, poor and rich. And we'll work together to ensure that we have a non-racial society.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Steenhuisen. What do you say to that? Because Mr. Steenhuisen, the Secretary General of the United Nations, was very clear that worldwide, including here in South Africa, we have these huge challenges. And in your view, the governing party says it's going to continue to pursue its programs. It's doing enough. What should change?
So here's the thing. I have traveled around the world and I have been to many countries. And certainly South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. So while Mr. Magashule may boast that they've got rid of the Group Areas Act, the truth of the matter is there's still deep structural inequality and spatial inequality in South Africa. And here we are 20-odd years after democracy, and life hasn't changed for many, many, many South Africans. So here's the thing. What we need to do is build a capable state. Because without a capable state, none of the visions or the values that have been outlined by the Secretary-General of the United Nations has so eloquently said in that document is possible. So even here, as you've seen over the course of the last few months,
sorry, Mr. Steenhuisen, is it a capable state or is it a capable developmental state that we need?
It's a capable state. And here's why a capable state is important, because only a capable state can deliver the socio-economic change that you require. So the example I was about to give you, even when you give government their due where they have come up with some good plans, increasing the SASSA grant during the course of the crisis, the UIF and TERS program, it is all run headlong into the incapable state. So even your good intention is impossible to implement on the ground because you just don't have a capable state that's able to ensure those services happen. And of course, in the incapable state, you have the leakage out of the system into the pockets of politicians, as we've seen over the time. So unfortunately, the only uplifting you're seeing is the uplifting of public finances into the pockets of politicians and the uplifting of paintings out of official offices into the private homes and hands of politicians, all the while the people are left behind. None of what you can have the best laid plans. If you don't have a capable state that can ensure that the rubber hits the road in communities, that when you pay for the housing in the national fiscus, every cent of that money goes to actually delivering housing on the ground. Without a capable state, none of these plans will ever be possible.
A capable state. General Holomisa, earlier you spoke about we need to have competent people in government. And I'm going to ask you this question, a capable state or a capable developmental state? What are your views, General Holomisa, on that?
I'm not interested in getting into argument of semantics, but the bottom line is that we have to build our economy. We need to build this cake so that we can divide it amongst our people in terms of the priorities of the country. Currently, we have been consuming a lot without baking the cake. In actual fact, if we were to converge under one roof as South Africans, business, politicians, and so on, the UDM would say we need to have a consensus on what kind of macroeconomic policy this country should have. Because from 1994-95, right from the time of RDP and other policies, the tripartite alliance themselves, were too divided. Every economic policy which the ANC presents to the nation, PASA to SACP will shoot it down. Until when?
Until when, Mr. Magashule?
Well, General Holomisa says, I agree with him, because what we are saying, the ANC is an independent organization. The Communist Party is entitled to its positions. COSATU is also entitled to its position. But we are the ANC and we are governing. And we are working together with our alliance partners. We are working together with society. And there is no way when we are requested to work together, because General Holomisa is one of our own. I'm sure we will actually be delighted if we work together with him, because those who are still preserving the rights and the interest of the few are not going to discontinue doing so. With General Holomisa, we are sharing our constituency is the constituency which we are supposed to lift up. And that's why we will closely work together whenever we are called to do so. And I'm sure, let's respect that we are different, we are independent, but the common goal is to better the lives of our people. And let's not forget that this unequal society and deep structural inequalities arises from what apartheid has actually done for not 25 years, for not 50 years, for many years. And that's why I want Mr. DA leader to understand and not make it simplified as if we should not actually still talk about what happened during those years. It's a deep structural inequalities. And that's why we need to de-racialize and build the economy and redistribute the wealth of this country. Take it out of the hands of the few who are white. I hope our white compatriots and white South Africans can realize if they can play their role in South Africa, as the United Nations Secretary-General is saying, and what General Holomisa is saying, this country will be a wonderful country.
Well, the apartheid was mentioned by the United Nations General Secretary in his speech, Mr. Steenhuisen, where he referred to the fact that colonialism, and I'm quoting, created vast inequality within and between countries, including the evils of transatlantic slave trade and the apartheid regime here in South Africa. So we can't ignore the fact that we are actually beset with that legacy. But the way forward, we have to find each other. And that's what you were saying earlier, that you think people must find each other and work together. And listening to Ace Magashule now, how would you respond to that?
Well, we have been working together. Let me just start off by saying that I agree completely. We have got a terrible legacy to undo. And, you know, many of the people who were responsible for that legacy now sit on Mr. Magashule's benches in Parliament when their parties merged a couple of years ago. The party of apartheid is now well emboweled in the ANC. But we've got to work together. We've got to, you know, get out of this. We're going to all sink or swim. If the country goes down, we're all going to go down. So we all have an absolute intrinsic interest in ensuring that we build a prosperous, inclusive future for South Africa and that we build a path to prosperity for all South Africans. And that is why we remained very constructive all through this crisis, including just this week. We've put on the table a constructive plan that government could use to get as many citizens as possible safely through this COVID crisis. So we remain absolutely committed to building a new majority in South Africa of like-minded South Africans who want to build a better future for the country. We can
sorry, Mr. Steenhuisen, Mr. Steenhuisen, sorry to cut you in there. You've made your point. Yes, we acknowledge the past. I hear you. But for you, what does inclusivity look like? Because I'm asking this on the back of that lecture that we heard from the United Nations Secretary-General, and we here in South Africa, we're still battling with that in corporate South Africa, in society, in sporting codes. We've seen this cricket saga playing itself out, and Kaya Ntini, Mama Kaya Ntini, pouring out his soul, what happened to him after his brilliant performances. I'm just using that as an example. What does inclusivity look like? Because to address inequality, according to the United Nations Secretary-General this afternoon, we have to build an inclusive society globally.
Absolutely. So inclusivity means that everybody in South Africa is able to participate in the economy in a meaningful way, and that is able to access basic services, and is able to achieve and become all they want to be, being given all the same opportunities as everybody else in the country. But here's the thing. We can't have an equal and inclusive society with 30 million people who live below the poverty line. We've got to do something about the economy to lift people out of poverty. Poverty is actually the biggest killer in South Africa. It's responsible for many, many more deaths than COVID or any other disease in South Africa. It's not sustainable to have 30 million South Africans living in poverty while you have a very, very small elite class of connected cadres who are billionaires and trillionaires, and so many people are locked out of opportunity. So it means breaking up these government monopolies and providing opportunity for citizens, to giving more power to people and taking power away from the state, empowering people to be active citizens and to be able to participate in the economy and to have access to the opportunities that they need to fulfill their potential. That's how you build an inclusive society.
General Holomisa, for you, what does inclusivity look like?
Given that we have inherited a system where the majority citizens were not empowered, it is unthinkable. How can we expect the job creation to be successful if 53 million black South Africans go and queue looking for jobs from the companies which are managed by, say, 3 million population? Not all of them own those companies. So there is therefore a need to invest in the majority citizens of this country, access to capital, and make sure that we train them. To me, that would be the start, more than that, just to say, let's go and play golf together, and that's it. So after that, I go to my shack, and then you go to a 5-star house. So the best way is to look at our economic situation and make sure that we create our own wealth creators within the black community so that they can employ the people.
Ace Magashule, sorry, finally to you, say, what does inclusivity look like?
Well, as Nelson Mandela said some years ago, I'm not going to quote him verbatim, he said, reconciliation without economic justice is and will never be an option. So what South Africans and black South Africans need is not just this inclusivity. We just have to ensure that our black and white brothers understand that for as long as there is no economy for black people and human beings in general in South Africa, who are in the majority, by the way, in huge numbers, millions, this is what we have to do so that we then have, and we can talk about a prosperous South Africa for all, where we can live in peace and harmony.
Thank you very much. Secretary-General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, the leader of the UDM, General Bantu Holomisa, and of course the leader of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance DA, Mr. John Steenhuisen, for having been with us here this afternoon as we're reflecting on the 18th annual lecture that was delivered earlier this afternoon by the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.